Hello and welcome back to the Digital Studio. If you're joining us for the first time, we're coming to you live from the PRI studio in the exhibition hall at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. I'm Emily West, your digital host for the next 3 days, and you can explore the virtual agenda at any time by selecting Agenda on the navigation bar and choosing PRI in-person-digital. So I'm delighted for this next session to be talking about the PRI strategy for 2024 to 2027. And we're really excited to have with us in the studio David Atkin, CEO for PRI, and Esther Teeken, who's back, who's COO. So we're going to be posing your questions to David and Esther, and you can do this using Slido. You can find Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. Make sure to select Live Studio when you submit your questions. If you can't see Slido, please just exit full screen mode, and then you'll be able to see it on the right-hand side. So David, coming to you first, the PRI has just launched a new strategy for the organisation. Please can you share a bit more about the process to get to its publication and the why that underpins it all?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Great to be here and to join everyone online. The first thing is that we had a very extensive consultation process around the new strategy. The PRI in its governance articles is required to have a formal consultation whenever it develops its new strategy every 3 years. But this one was really interesting because we'd just come out of COVID and there was a lot of change. We'd been in an environment where there were a lot of tailwinds that were really driving the adoption of responsible investment. And we were reaching sort of a new phase of new challenges, headwinds in a range of ways, which I'll expand on shortly. But I think the first thing to say is, when I joined the PRI as the CEO and seeing how it had changed from when I was on the board of the PRI as an asset owner representative from 2009 to 2015. If you'd said to us in 2009 or 2006 when the PRI was established, that by 2023-24 we'd have 5,300 signatories from 100 countries representing all of the asset classes and more than 180 trillion US, 128 trillion, sorry, we would have said you were dreaming. And yet we've seen this bottom-up thematic really driven by the investment community. And it's been driven because there's been a growing recognition that when it comes to thinking about the balance sheet, when it comes to thinking about investment, there is missing information that could materially impact your ability to achieve your returns and your investment objectives for your beneficiaries. And that is of an E, an S, and a G nature. And so investors have, over the last 15 to 20 years, have really adopted the principles of the PRI to improve the way that they can assess risk and opportunity. And so this consultation was very important because it was then checking in with the environment that they were dealing with. Now, what we learnt was that signatories still value the idea of the PRI as a global organisation, this depository of knowledge and experience, and the ability to convene a network with peers as highly, highly valuable. But they said things like, the PRI needs to understand that there's no one way to be a responsible investor. We need to be less homogenous in the way that we describe what good looks like. We also need to understand that the priorities that signatories work on is very much shaped by the markets that they come from. And they also talked about the fact that we're increasingly in a world where we're seeing this top-down architecture being put in place by regulators and policymakers around the world. And it's very important the PRI brings the practitioner's perspective in terms of the way those regulations are being formed. So there were some key things. There's more that we can get into in the conversation, but that formed the basis of us developing the strategy that we've just published.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that context. It's a really useful background in which to understand the new strategy. Are you able to share a bit more about the objectives of the new strategy and how this will impact PRI's program priorities moving forwards?
So for this strategy, we've tried to be more top-down, to be frank, and to try to be more focused. The PRI historically has tried to respond to all the different signals that we receive from signatories about the things that are important to them. And we need to be careful that we're not spreading ourselves too thin and therefore not having an impact. So in that process, and when we thought about what we had heard from signatories, we kind of captured it down to sort of two key overarching objectives, which is around maximising the value to our signatories in a rapidly evolving environment, and to deliver on the PRI's mission, which, as you know, is to create a sustainable financial system that benefits the environment and society as a whole. So they're the two overarching objectives, and then there are 4 strategic pillars, and that's about driving signatory progression on responsible investment while streamlining our own mandatory reporting, because we've heard that reporting is becoming very onerous given the multitude of other mandatory and voluntary requirements. To strengthen regional investment ecosystems in both mature markets and emerging markets, and also to amplify signatory impact by supporting and leading collaborative initiatives, so the work on initiatives, and then finally strengthening the enabling environment around policy. So they're the 4 key strategic pillars, and they're now driving our program of work for the next 3 years.
Fantastic. And I know we'll be talking more about some of those key pillars and themes tomorrow and the day after as well. So thank you for that. It sounds like PRI's got some big ambitions there. Esther, could you share a bit about how the PRI is going to implement these plans?
Yes, definitely. And thank you, Emily, and thank you all for joining us. So, as David highlighted, we went through this extensive process with the PRI board and our signatories to finalize it. And actually, this process has also given us the ability to move forward with confidence and ensuring that we both prioritize the work as well that the signatories told us they value the most, while also simultaneously ensuring that we are progressing towards achieving our mission. So how to operationalize these plans and deliver them against the stated priority areas. Let me get you through some of the focus efforts that we have across this coming year. Our reporting year ends in March next year and into the year after, starting in April in 2025. So first of all, for the progression, signatory progression, we are designing and building a progression pathways framework to help our signatories on their responsible investment journey. We're working on the reporting for our signatories too, which will include an acceleration of our efforts to reduce the reporting burden that our signatories these days experience. And also we will address the duplication between our reporting and the equivalent RI reporting requirements from any regulators. So working towards these progression pathways will probably take us 2 to 3 years. Then on the second focus area is our work to strengthen regional responsible investment ecosystems. We'll center more around building opportunities to bring our signatories together, the convening power that we have, both within the markets but also globally. And we want to create more forums to tackle best practices and actually tackle the responsible investment challenges together. Just like we do here this week at the PRI in person. We will expanding our engagement. We will have some more regional policy capacity, specifically in the APEC region, like in Japan and Australia, and also focus on the emerging markets, like in Brazil, the Spanish LATAM for next year. Then the third focus area is the signatory collaboration. We will continue to lead our well-established collaborative initiatives while we work to develop and grow the latest, the newer stewardship initiatives, such as Advance and Spring and the Sovereign Engagement on Climate Change. Alongside this, we're kicking off to improve the collaboration platform. We're starting with the work and to better enable our signatories' own collaboration efforts. And then finally, to strengthen the enabling environment for responsible investment, we are expanding outreach to the multilateral organizations and continuing to work on local policy issues and together with our policymakers. It will ensure that signatory priorities are reflected in policies adequately and in dialogues on a local and a global level. We're going to launch expansion into new markets through some key consultations. And we start with focus in UAE, Korea, and Singapore. So it's a lot.
It is a lot.
And to support this all, we do need to make sure that our operational support, the services that our signatories value, and that we can achieve together the successes of PRI and, of course, focus on our mission. So we aim to fortify our cybersecurity modernize our internal technology, and implement critical updates to streamline our platforms and legacy systems to improve the user experiences for our own people internally as well as for our signatories externally. So we're already started and will continue strengthening the legal and the compliance requirements and the capacities to meet the challenges that we've seen posed over the last 18 months more and more with the increasing regulatory requirements, but also with the growing anti-ESG sentiment in the US. So there's just a few small bits to get on, I would say, but no, there's a lot of excitement things to come, and I'm really we're all as in the executive team, but I would say in the whole of the PRI, really looking forward to utilizing the opportunities and bringing the signatories on the journey with us, really starting driving progression together. And so, yeah, I would say, David, shall I hand over to you and see if there's some digital gates opening for questions?
Before we go to questions, David, though, you just described a huge, program of work, which is all very exciting. David, do you have any final thoughts on that before we go to our audience questions?
Well, I think the strategy is also a response to the fact that the PRI's growth doubled in size in 4 years. So from 2019 to 2023, we more than doubled in size. So the challenge for the PRI is how do we now meet the needs of a more and more diverse signatory base? And so this strategy is in response to that. How do we scale up, stay relevant, be more relevant, but in a way that's meaningful for signatories, but recognizing that there's difference as well. And so, yeah, we're trying to get the balance between those things in this new strategy, and also to make sure that there is still driving ambition, because our work is not done. The work of signatories is not done. So notwithstanding that we've now got more than half the capital in the world signed up to the principles, there's so much more to do. So how do we focus our efforts on what really matters? And that's what this strategy is trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're going to be coming to your audience questions, and you can pose those to us through Slido, which is available on the right-hand side of your screen. Just make sure to select Live Studio. And we've also got some questions that you submitted in advance, so thank you so much for that. The first question we have is, what is the PRI's approach to tackling challenges associated with driving responsible investment in emerging markets?
So the first thing to say is that we've recognised that the emerging markets, we need active, responsible investment communities in emerging and developing markets for our theory of change to succeed. And that is, we need capital flowing into those markets. We also need investors in those markets adopting the principles and driving the change process. The sustainability issues don't get solved if we just solve a developing markets question. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's not like this is new. Developing markets is not new. We've got 650 already in the PRI. It's building off that base. But we also know that there are some markets where we're softer than we would like, or where there's potential for growth. For example, India is probably the number one priority of where we've got 40 signatories, but we think given that's the largest populace in the world, we need to be more active and evident there. Part of what we need to do is deploy more resources into those, into Africa, into Latin America and Southeast Asia, into India. We also need to connect better our programs of work based on the needs of those markets. I think the whole biodiversity nature piece starts to sort of get into, more interesting thematics and how they play itself out, because nature is different to climate. Climate, we know it's a number and we know what we need to work to. Whereas nature is very regional and geographic, focused. And so how we play that through in emerging markets is really important. How we can support the policy enablers is also something that we're looking to do with this. In addition, there are a number of global initiatives around climate, around nature and biodiversity, and we think there's an opportunity to tweak those in a local context that are more relevant to a South Africa or to a Mexico or to a Brazil. And so how we tweak those initiatives that are collaborative but in the local market context is what we'll also be focusing on.
Fantastic. And it's clear PRI has a huge role to play in emerging markets in this area. As we said, you can submit your questions on Slido on the right-hand side of your screen if you have questions for David and Esther. And the second question we have here is, tell us how the strategy is going to enhance signatory value.
Yeah, I can start on that, David. I mean, the main benefits of consulting with our signatories and, of course, on our strategy is that it enables us to hear from many of what they do and what they will find valuable in the work that what we do. So I can break it down by the focus areas that we have. And so, for example, with driving signatory progression, we're thinking of the progression pathway framework with supporting different objectives, approaches, and levels of advancement of our various groupings of signatories. We're also, a second part of that would be a foundational reporting, more maintaining accountability and the ability to benchmark without, with of course, reducing the reporting burden substantially. And then the third part is the equivalency, is making sure that we're leading the way in beginning to address the duplication across the RI reporting. Then if we go to the regional investment ecosystems and how we strengthen that, we definitely, like I earlier referred to already, but more specifically is create more opportunities for our signatories to come together, learn from each other, share best practices regionally and globally. And therefore we're also, having in mind more regional meetings starting next year, besides our annual convening event like the PRI in person. We're going to do more regionalized policy work to actually better capture the nuances of the local markets and support our signatories and champion the responsible investment at all levels of government. We're going to leverage our competitive advantage, and we will want to bring policy, guidance, and convening expertise to the emerging markets. So to begin, like David mentioned, to build that bridge between the developed countries and the developing countries and economies. We want to create those opportunities more and more. And of course, we want to have signatory supporting team across the globe to better base it. And that's one of the aspects we've done last year, is we allocated our working force across the globe more instead of being focused in one country. Now, if we then go to the third focus area, the supporting and the collaborative initiative, few examples for that is collective voice and influence on key issues, the amplification of the signatory impact on the initiatives, addressing systemic issues, and enabling our signatories to demonstrate commitment and progress via the various groupings that they have, collaboration platform, and other ways how to communicate with each other, and the ability to engage collaboratively between investees, policymakers, and our signatories. And then when we go to the enabling environment, we can see that we really want to support and identify taking actions on barriers to the responsible investment and the sustainable financial systems. We want, of course, as I just mentioned, a policy consultation, but we also want to have enabling the policy environment with more digital improvements, improving the signatory journey, the user experience with all the various systems that we have. The website, the reporting portal, the collaboration platform, and any other platforms that we have, besides, of course, legal support, specifically on the anti-ESG. Any other specific examples that I missed out on that?
No, that's good. I think you've done a great job there, Esther. But just to sort of summarize, if you think about what the PRI does, so we have people join, and we look to help those as individual institutions become better at what they do. So we have a whole range of programs of work, guidance, due diligence, reporting. All of these things are about helping you become better at responsible investment as an individual institution. But if you believe the thematic, you know you can't solve all these issues on your own. We need to create opportunities for signatories to work together on climate, nature, governance, human rights. But even with those two things, we operate in a system of rules and codes. And so at a global level, we need to be able to influence those to create a more enabling environment for responsible investment, because those rules have been set up for a previous world. And then finally, we tilt it to regions based on where our signatories actually work from. So I think that's the value proposition. And I think that program of work that Esther just stepped us through gives a little bit more granularity.
Thank you so much. We're going to ask one final quick question to you, David, if that's okay. Obviously, one of the challenges PRI and your signatories are dealing with is an ESG backlash.
Yeah.
Is this something that you see as here to stay? And if so, how is it being addressed in your strategy?
So the first thing is that much of this debate's healthy. Like there should be an opportunity to ensure that there is integrity in the claims that are being made by signatories around their responsible investment credentials, and also that having alternative views is not a bad thing. What we want is that debate to be based on facts and science. Unfortunately, some of what we have seen is not that. It's for political purposes, but I mean you can also understand it, because actually the reason why this anti-ESG debate we are having is because the work of investors working together and engaging with companies based on their own individual fiduciary responsibilities, but that dialogue, that stewardship is having an impact from the fossil fuel industry, who are pushing back because they can see that their business models are potentially impacted. But in addition, I mean, I think this is important. We need to recognise that there is the concern of communities about being stranded as we change our economies and our energy systems to renewables. And so understandably, there's a level of anxiety. We need to engage with that. That's why the just transition is very important. The other thing that I would say is there's not a single meeting that I do in the world where the issue of what's happening in the US is not raised. There is a great deal of anxiety about, is this going to stop the work of investors? Very clearly, in my view, absolutely not. Because as a fiduciary, if you believe that these issues could materially impact your investments, you can't unbelieve that. So even though we're seeing a change, people stepping back from being so vocal or maybe being involved in collaborative initiatives, the work that they're doing continues. Frankly, if it stops, then I think they're opening themselves up to fiduciary risk, because you can't suddenly unbelieve what you believed. The other point that I would make is that the US, there are many great things happening in the US, notwithstanding the anti-ESG debate. You're seeing the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, materially create incentives and subsidies to drive renewable investments. We're seeing California, the 5th largest economy in the world, create some of the most progressive climate disclosure laws that are now in law. And there's a lot of great activity our signatures are doing. In addition, the world is heading in one direction. The world is putting in place, it's not smooth, it's not linear, and it's not fast enough, but the world is putting in place the jigsaw puzzle required to respond to transitioning our economies, to deal with climate and to deal with biodiversity. And so while this is a bit of a bump in the road, it will not stop the work of investors. And I'm very, very clear about that.
Thank you so much. It's such an interesting topic. I think we could just keep talking just on that one question for hours.
We could.
And thank you so much to our audience for pre-submitting such great questions. David and Esther, thank you so much for taking the time to join us in the studio. We really appreciate it. We'll now be taking a short break and we'll be back in the plenary in 10 minutes. We've got a really interesting fireside chat for you on geopolitics, instability, and the impact on ESG with Tina Fordham and Wendy Cromwell. And I'm really excited to share that Tina and Wendy will be joining us back here in the studio afterwards to answer your questions. So we look forward to seeing you then.